Group Fitness Fundamentals, Communication and Cuing, Chapter 4. There are 3 ways that people learn. The most common is visual, and people need to see it to do it. So these are the people in your classes that are going to stand right behind you in choreography, because they have to have a clear line of sight to see what you are doing in order to actually replicate what you want. These people will copy everything you do. So if you scratch your nose or put your hand up to say go to the right, they will do the same thing. If they can see what you're doing, they can figure it out. So they need to be in a spot where they can see. As a leader, to cater to these people, use the Watch Me system, where you get your participants into a simple pattern in choreography, and then you get them to keep going, and then you show the change. Your visual people should be able to see it and then do it from that perspective. In a sport conditioning class, you might show a modification while they're in the circuit, and then they can replicate it later. Using from the top with them is great, and other consistent hand gestures, because they're going to watch what your hands are doing. So you want to count with your fingers, show direction and lead with your hands, and use any kind of other fancy hand movements to cue your movements. One of the best experiences I ever had was teaching a person who was hearing impaired in my classes. So she came to a choreography class that I was teaching. She had to stand right behind me because she could only see. She could feel the music, but she couldn't hear what I was saying. So I had to be very, very focused and make sure that all of my hand signals were consistent, and I had a hand signal for every move that we did so that she was able to follow along. It was a good practice, and I recommend you just imagine that people can't hear you. They have to see. So your visual people, you get practice working with that visual learning style. Kinesthetic is the next popular. The people that prefer this style of learning learn by doing. So they need lots of repetition and over and over and over, showing variations so they can play, mix and match, figure it out, get the movement pattern down. As a leader, the best thing you can do is you start with a big pattern and you break it down to what you want to do in the end, giving lots of options and practicing the pieces over and over and over, and then putting it together at the end. Your kinesthetic people like that repetition. The last one is auditory and listening. So these people tend to rely on the words that you say more than anything else. They don't need to see you. They probably aren't even looking at you in class. So you have to make sure that your music is appropriate. There's not too many words or it's not too distracting. And make sure that the microphone sound levels and the music sound levels are appropriate. So you're not too soft and you're not too loud with the music. As I am an auditory learner, so I like to stand right under the speakers so I can hear. And then I'm basically just listening for what you're telling me. So your cueing needs to be clear, concise, and on time. If you're a little slow or a little late, then I haven't heard it in advance enough to make a decision on the next move, then I'm going to get lost. So making sure that you're using correct terminology. And I recommend in choreography classes to minimize the repetition of the same move in every pattern, because as an auditory learner, that can get confusing. So if there is, for example, a basic up in every pattern, that can get confusing to your auditory learners. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you use all three. Make sure you cater to all 3 styles in your class, because you never know what combination of styles your class will be. They might all be visual, or you might have one auditory person in there and the rest kinesthetic. Make sure that you vary it up so that you're hitting each different learning style. Group communication, a couple of key pieces to this. It needs to be effective and efficient. Your message has to get through from you. It has to be heard by the participant. They have to process it. They have to do it. And they also have to remember it. So you have to make sure that you're clear and concise. that you're getting enough information across in a very short amount of time. So you're getting rid of all of your filler words, your extra talking, making sure that you're keeping it succinct and to the point. Verbal cueing, that's only about 7% of the messages of the words you choose. The tone of voice actually gives a lot more information to your participants, about 38% of the message. And then your nonverbal is most of what you're doing. So the gestures you use, your posture, your facial expressions, making eye contact is so important, and the movements you perform. Most people are going to copy those things, less of what you say, but making sure that both are clear and consistent at all times. Cueing to communicate in a group fitness class is definitely a learned skill. It's not something that you just are able to do. You're moving, you're trying to remember your movements, you are trying to remember your pattern, you're trying to watch for technique, making sure everyone is safe, listen to the music, and then try to get what you want that's in your head out of your mouth. It's a challenge, and it just takes practice. And the ones that make it easy have been doing it for a long time. So make sure you give yourself a break, and it just comes down to practice, practice, practice. We're talking about a combination of clear, consistent verbal messages and nonverbal signals. So saying as much as you can with as few words as possible, and then you're adding hands, arms, facial expressions, and body language to pick it up and fill out what you're wanting to say. As an instructor, your job is to make sure you get what your plan is out in as many ways as possible, so that everybody has a chance to understand and be successful. And then if it's not working, you have to figure out something different, either in the moment or after class. So some general stuff about verbal cues, making sure that you're clear, consistent, and concise. Less is more. So rather than saying, okay guys, now we're going to do 8 basics and then go to a knee up and then these steps, say basics for 8. Knee up for 4, V-step for 2. Very, very clear and concise. You're saying what you want and how many you want them to do. It's descriptive. Make sure that your cues are just as descriptive as possible. So you want to go to the basic right, up, up, down, down. You want to get into a front plank. Your elbows are under your shoulders from the knees or the toes. Pull the belly in, lift the hips up, straight line from the crown of the head to the knees. Shoulders are down and away from the ears. Belly button is pulled in and breathe. In a cycle, the weight forward, standing up, holding on to the ends of the handlebars into the standing climb. Your glutes are grazing the tip of the saddle, weight is slightly forward, and you're pushing through the pedal all the way through. So using as much descriptive terminology as possible so people know exactly what they should be feeling and what position they should be getting into. There is a line, though. In a choreography class, you don't have to tell everyone in advance what they're going to be doing. So, for example, you don't have to say, we're going to go and do basic for 2, hamstring curl for 4, repeater knee for 8. We're going to do that 8 times and then move on. Just get them going and doing it, and as you develop the pattern and you break it down and you practice and you get to where you want them to be, the pattern will make sense. They'll just follow. They don't need to know in advance. They don't need to decide or make any decisions on how many you're going to do. They're just going to listen and follow. Counting is very important. When you first start teaching, you're probably, especially in choreography classes, you'll be probably counting every move that you do. And as you become more efficient, you'll just start off with 8, knees up, 4 more, 3, 2, grapevine, or whatever move is coming up. You'll stop counting every move because you can use the music then to help you count. In a cycling class, you'll probably do less counting. You'll be doing more timing, so using the watch and doing all of that. Same with sport conditioning. You might be getting them to count on their own, so they're going to do a set of 16 repetitions on the push-ups on their own. They're counting. If you're not done in 60 seconds, stop wherever you are, and then we'll go on to the next exercise. So counting is maybe a little bit differently in those settings. Making sure that when you count a move in a choreography class, you're not counting the beats, you're counting the moves, how many you can do. Next, voice inflections and phrases indicate changes are coming. Things like get ready, let's go, 4 more, last time, anything like that that gets people to look up and say, oh, there's something happening, I better pay attention. Especially your auditory learners can still kind of get into the zone, and they'll just keep going with movement until you tell there's something new coming up. You can also use a hand clap to indicate a change is coming, or a hoot or a holler, anything like that would work. In a cycling or sport conditioning class, using the get ready in 5, 4, 3, 2, and stand would work. In a sport conditioning class, you can use your music to indicate changes are coming by downloading timer dings and buzzers and different things like that, so that you can incorporate into your music to indicate when people are to start and stop a movement. Finally, learn the lingo. It's a whole new language in fitness. So you have to learn the phrases that go along with movement, how to describe a position, and basically figuring out what words work with your style. So it takes practice, it takes time when you're going to classes, and as a participant, start thinking about how would you cue this? How would you use your hands? What would you say? Does that make sense? And then you'll start to build your repertoire of skills from there. Nonverbal cues, that includes facial and body expressions. So making sure when you say stand with good posture, you stand with good posture and you push the chest out, pull the abdominals in. When you step softly onto a bench, you're demonstrating that, what you want people to do. When you show a modification or high intensity move, you're indicating with your body how you want your participants to move. So making sure that you have good technique in that respect. Exaggerated, precise, controlled, and consistent. I think of this when I'm using my hands to cue what direction I want people to go, what leg they want to go up, if I'm showing a symbol for a movement. So I think of cheerleaders when I think of nonverbal cues and using my hands. They're very strong, they're very precise, they get your attention. You want to make sure that they are in that kind of feeling, where there's strength behind the movements. Body positioning and technique, similar to using your body expressions, is making sure that whatever movement you choose, you can do to show, because your visual people need to see it. Making eye contact is probably one of the most important things you can do in a class in terms of building rapport and creating a sense of connected with your participants. You can make eye contact directly when you're facing them, or eye contact in the mirror works as well. Just make sure you're moving it around and not staring at one person. It's unnerving for that one person if you're just looking at them all the time. Making sure that when you first start teaching, it's going to be a challenge because there's so many things going on in that first few classes. But even if you make eye contact with people in the sides of the room, then you'll be able to see most people in the periphery from that and be able to see if something is happening, if someone's not safe, they're not doing things quickly, or you need to make a reactive cue from there. Finally, the watch me cue. So if you're going to do something that's a little different, a little bit more technical, a little bit more choreographed, get people into a pattern that they can do themselves, like a squat or an alternating hamstring curl or a seated climb on the bike, and then you show them what you want them to do. Great way to use your body and to communicate a change without actually having to use their own words. When you're giving feedback to your participants, it's so important to make sure that you are as constructive as possible, because how people are treated in the class really will determine attendance and success. So making sure that they're as comfortable as possible. Make sure you take action, but be respectful. So be respectful of people's abilities and boundaries. And do your best to keep the experience as positive as you can. Just know that sometimes you'll have people that are brand new in your class and they are having trouble with everything. Rather than correcting every little thing that they do and making them feel embarrassed and awkward and not have a good time, pick your battles and pick the movements that are going to be the most risky for them. So things with squats and lunges would probably be the one I would focus more on in terms of knee position. And then anything where the core is being extremely challenged to make sure that they're in a safe position. So just make sure that you don't want to overwhelm them or make them really uncomfortable. So pick your battles, and then make sure you also give feedback to other people at the same time so you don't feel singled out. So when you're giving feedback, you're delivering, there's several options to giving people information to make a change in technique. Some have pros and some have cons to them. So if you deliver general statement to the entire group, that works, but if I don't know I'm doing something wrong in your class, I'm not going to make a change. So giving this general overriding statement is a good thing to do because your auditory people will pick up on it and your experienced people will pick up on it, but your new people or people that just don't think they're doing anything incorrectly, it's not even going to hit them. So then you might need to take it to the next step. We have to make a specific recommendation to an individual. Just be careful if you pull people out because it can cause embarrassment. I would never, from the front of the room, call out and say, "Hey, Stacy, you need to get your knees behind your toes," because then everyone's going to turn and look at Stacy, and Stacy's going to be standing there going, "Oh my goodness, I'm so embarrassed." So rather than calling people out, I would go up to individuals and talk to several people in the class, giving positive or negative reinforcement, and then make sure I talk to the person that actually is doing the movement incorrectly so that they don't feel like they're being singled out and they know they need to make a change. You can move the person into the proper position, but always be sure you ask for permission to touch them. And I suggest asking permission to touch at the beginning of the class, and then if there's people that you're not going to be able to do it, they'll stay then. And then even if everyone is granted permission, before you go and touch them, warn them and say, "I'm going to touch your shoulder," or "I'm going to touch your knee, is that okay?" So you're giving them a heads up so you're not surprising them. This will get the person to make the change that's required. You could exercise next to the participant. Again, it might cause embarrassment if they feel like that's the only place you go and then you go back to the front. So then I would suggest working yourself around the room. So you exercise to one side, you go to the other side, you go to the middle, and you go and stand beside the person that's doing it incorrectly. This way nobody knows who you're trying to fix, you're just maybe trying something different and you're getting into the group a little bit more. The only thing is that the participant may not know a change is required because you're not doing something specific to them. So again, you're going to have to pay attention and see what the person does if they actually respond to being close to them. Moving around the room, again, is a good idea. So you're not actually exercising, you're actually just talking and doing as you go. So I would suggest that you give feedback to several people. So you're going around and you're tweaking here and there, and you also visit the person you want to correct. You might spend a little more time with that person, that's okay, but you've talked to different people and there's no one is thinking that I'm just the only one that's being corrected. So you're going to get some good results with that because people will know what they need to change. Make sure you reinforce people when they do it correctly. So even if you haven't corrected them or you weren't worried about them, but you want to give positive feedback to them, make sure you spread it around, because if you're only reinforcing the same people, then people think that, well, you don't pay attention to me or I'm feeling left out. Just remember, reinforced behavior is likely going to be repeated, so if you can reinforce that perfect squat or that perfect repeater or that great standing climb, then people are going to keep doing it because they're going to make a note of, what am I doing? You can appeal to safety and provide the rationale for why you're doing something. This may be too general for the person that you want to fix or change, so they might not get it that you're actually talking to them. So it's good to include this generally, but if you're wanting to make a change during an activity, then this might not be the way to go. So you might be talking about making sure your full foot comes on the step so that your calf doesn't get overloaded higher than it could cause an overuse injury. There's still people that keep their heels off the step even after you give that safety cue. So you still need to go around and watch, and then maybe you have to go and do another form of giving feedback to get them, make sure that their heels are on the bench. So again, it's good to do it generally speaking, but if you want to make a specific change to someone's movement, then you might need to get it more specific. Try to be as positive as possible when you're giving feedback. Avoid saying, don't lock the knees, and use keep the knees soft. This is a challenge because it's easier to go to the negative sometimes and say what you don't want to see. But really try to do your best to keep it as positive as possible. It's definitely a skill, and it takes practice to do that. And finally, you have the sandwich technique. This takes a little more time, so it usually works in like a muscle conditioning class or in a circuit class or a strength conditioning class, or even a cycle class, where you're coming up to the individual, you point out something positive about what they're doing, you make your suggestion that they need to change, and then you reinforce the change. So it might be, Sam, I really like how your lunge is looking. Can you make sure that your knee stays in line with your toes rather than collapsing in? Perfect, good, excellent. Push out against my hand, or that looks great, keep it up. So then people are getting a little boost to their self-esteem, and then they get the correction and then the reinforcement that they've done a good job. When you get feedback, it sometimes is positive, but most of the time it's negative, just a heads up. I always try to encourage my participants to come and talk to me after class with questions and concerns. It opens the door. That's usually the last thing I say before the class is over, so that people feel like they can come and chat with me if they have something they need to ask or an issue about the class. But just a heads up, you can't please everyone. There's always going to be someone who doesn't like it. So just so you know, you're appealing to the masses, and there's always one that doesn't quite like what it's done. So, and that's okay. You'll never please everybody. And if when you do get the positive feedback, cherish it, focus on it, write it down, celebrate it, because it doesn't happen very often, unfortunately. It's just the way people work. They tend to tell you what they don't like rather than what they do. So when getting feedback, a couple of tips. So if a participant asks for a change, so for example, they want different music, or they give a complaint about a style or a movement or something that you've done, make sure you listen. Look at them, pay attention. When they're talking, repeat what they're saying so that you're clear on what they want or what they don't like. And then make sure you let them finish, and then come to a compromise of some sort. So they're either going to pass the information along, say thank you for your feedback, let them know that you've heard them, and try to find a way to solve the problem between yourselves. Don't take it personally. It's usually not a personal thing. Sometimes people just have bad days and you just happen to be in the way, so just keep that in mind. I've had people coming up and say they didn't like my music and I play something different, and basically we talked about it and said, well, what kind of music do you like to hear? And they gave me a list of the stuff they prefer to listen to, and I said, well, just so you know, I have to pay for all my music, so I don't have all that style, but I do have this one. Would that work for you? And they were more than happy with that, and then they used that music from then on. So you have to kind of work with them. It is their class. It is about them. It's not about you. So if you don't like country music, you're going to have to take one for the team if that's what the group wants. And it's their class. It's for them, and it's not necessarily about your own personal taste. Keeping this in mind, you're not there to be verbally abused. So if someone is yelling at you or getting in your face, or you're just not comfortable with the conversation, suggest that you talk about it at a later time, that you have to leave, or there's another class coming in, that you can't finish the conversation right now, and that you can set up a time to talk again, or that they should talk to your supervisor, set a date, something that you can give people a cooling off period, because it's not fair for someone to come up and be yelling at you for something that's not within your control, and it's not something that you are paid to deal with. So make sure you have your line and your boundaries, and make sure you know that you are totally in the right to say that you're not comfortable with a conversation. Sometimes you get feedback about other instructors, and try not to throw the other instructor under the bus. You know, making sure you're keeping it positive, asking if they talk to the instructor about their concerns. If it's a big safety issue or something that is unsafe or unprofessional, then I would suggest to the person to go and talk to the supervisor about it, because you're not really in a position to do anything about it. And when you're working with a colleague or a peer, it's not something that you can really act on. So it needs to go to the right set of ears. So indicating that you can pass it along to the supervisor. I would also suggest that they go and talk, because it's different when it comes from another instructor than when it comes from actually a participant. Also with teaching, your communication will be enhanced by the position that you're in your room, and mirroring is one way to enhance that visual communication, especially if you don't have mirrors in your studio or in your space. So facing the class is really a great way to communicate movements, changes, to build rapport, all those types of things. Mirroring works great in non-choreography based classes. So in cycling, facing your group is great. In a sport conditioning class, a circuit boot camp, a strength and conditioning class, facing the class is great. Just make sure you always remember your right is their left, so it's opposite. So make sure you're on the correct leg as they are. In choreography classes, it's a lot more challenging, just because your right is their left. And if a participant gets mixed up, especially a visual person, and they try to get on the correct foot, they don't flip it to their right and your left, they get on the left. So eventually, you and the participant will be facing the class. So I find for people to follow, for your visual people and your kinesthetic learners, facing the same direction in choreography is a lot simpler to follow. Advantages of mirroring, again, get more personal, direct eye contact, better vocal projection, especially if you don't have a mic. It's more student-centered, right, because then you're interacting with the students a little bit differently. In choreography classes, you can use this in the warm-up where things are much more simple, and in the cool-down, or in the strength and conditioning flexibility segments. So when you're doing your fancy choreography in the cardio segment, you're probably going to face the same direction, but you can mirror in the other pieces of the class when this being on the correct leg isn't as big of a deal. And as disadvantages, as I mentioned, it's difficult for a choreography class to follow if you're mirroring. But it works in other styles of classes. Class formations, there are lots of different variations on this. This is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. But as a leader, typically you're standing at the front of the room and people are all facing the same direction. You could teach from the middle, and that works well in a circuit or muscular conditioning style class where people are around you. You can also teach from the sides, and if ever your movements or your choreography has people facing the sides or the walls as opposed to the front of the room, sometimes it's a good idea to move your positioning so you're facing the same direction so your visual people can still see you. They're not craning and turning and trying to see you at the front and not looking at their steps. So you can move your position from the front to the side for specific movements or specific patterns to help your visual learners figure it out. Participant position, typically it's scattered, where people kind of try to fit themselves in. You can get more structured into rows if you're trying to maximize space with maximal people. It might be your facility has marked out spots where people need to put their benches, which is fine. You could teach in circle, which is kind of fun. It's great for circuits and sport conditioning classes. Or you can have people in the corners and then you're in the middle and looking around. So, and you have different stations in the corners. So there's lots of different ways that participants can line up. Traditionally, you're at the front of the room and people are scattered in some kind of order in the room behind you.